Without question, the dollar is the strongest of all the currencies out there in the world, and it has been for multiple decades. However, what I'm about to share with you in this video very well could challenge that dominance for the dollar. I'll explain how and why as we explore. The dollar has been the thorn in the side of many of the nations around the world that are somewhat friends with us here in the United States, but most of them have pulled further away. Some of them have directly defied the United States in multiple different ways, and that has led to the dollar being used as a weapon. But the dollar also has problems because it is essentially being inflated through policies by our central bank, the Federal Reserve. However, all other currencies are also facing problems of their own. This is why this is a nuanced discussion as far as about this new system that's really being talked about more and more here lately in the news. And in fact, I've seen several different conflicting reports about it being already launched. Well, it's not been totally launched. There's been parts of it that have been introduced. In fact, it was first introduced back in 2018. And that's BRICS Pay. I was first alerted by this from Gold Chick, who sent me a link to a video, who falsely noted that this thing had already launched, like it was in full scale, ready to go and ready to be used. There's another report from another agency that says that it's already being used by major banks in Russia and the Bank of China and the State Bank of India. And that it's really essentially already here, but really it's not been fully implemented yet. So you have to look at all the different sources. There's conflicting information about this, but it's called BRICS Pay. And BRICS Pay is something developed first in 2018. And this is something where they want to be able to create a single payment system. Although I do question how effective this thing can be, but we'll get into that into a moment. There's a website called TV BRICS that I think has some of the more fair reporting on this. It says the BRICS Pay, the unified payment system, will enable you to make payments in any country that joins the system, regardless of what currency is in the account. And this is something that the Vice President of the Association of Russian Banks, Oleg Pirskin, and a member of the BRICS Business Council Task Group stated that the development of the new international payment system of the BRICS countries was discussed both at the meeting of the 5 Business Council and the annual report represented to the BRICS leaders at the Johannesburg Summit, which happened back in August. So they're talking about this development of a mobile application, a common platform that will enable users to connect and will guarantee the coordinated work of the national payment systems of the BRICS countries. Other countries can also join the agreement. In fact, if you look at the website, they have a lot of language and on there that really is pretty much really close to central bank digital currency type of things. In fact, it will use CBDCs and tokenized assets, but it has a lot of ESG components to a lot of their language on their website, which is, I think, kind of interesting and really kind of what many of us are against. But it just goes to show you that kind of like seem to be birds from the same feather in that regard. But nonetheless, we don't know exactly when it will take off, but that will be discussed within the next year as an alternative to SWIFT, according to another report by PressTV.ir. And talking to reporters at the Moscow Financial Forum, a number of BRICS countries has already developed their own payment system. We are trying to implement our financial information transmission systems. Other BRICS countries are either creating their own systems or have their own systems. Therefore, for now, the issue is a topic of discussion only. So in other words, this thing is not anywhere near ready for prime time yet. But if people were to cooperate with this, then it very well could become a threat to the dollar or to the SWIFT system, which is based off of the dollar. And So there was a July meeting between Putin and Dilma Rousseff, the head of the China-based New Development Bank, which is also known as the BRICS Bank, which is going to be spearheading all of this. The former president of Brazil and their international financial institution was developing an alternative currency to the U.S. dollar as a necessary step at a time when Washington is using the U.S. dollar as a weaponized tool against other nations. NDB, this is the New Development Bank. The BRICS Bank was founded in 2014 in a bid to move away from the U.S. dollar in international trade as it aims to introduce other currencies as the medium for international trades, financial transactions. They have announced plans to float a gold-backed currency to settle international trade payments to challenge the global reserve status of the U.S. dollar. And those talks and those rumors kind of were squashed by the South African delegation, said that this really was not going to be happening at the August meeting. The decision to introduce a new currency, according to RT, is adding momentum to the ongoing de-dollarization trend unfolding in the global economy. And so with this thing, that's kind of more honest reporting about this thing and when it will occur here. But nonetheless, they are actively developing it, and the implementation would be difficult, as admitted by the Daily Huddle about this thing. And again, South Africa's finance minister is the one that said a BRICS-based payment system would aim to strengthen trade in local currencies as opposed to the U.S. dollar. So using their local currencies is a system where instead of using the dollar, they could use their currencies. But the problem with that is where is the trust in those currencies? Where is the trust, especially if they are inflating, and like the Turkish lira, which has a cycle of inflation? They're not very trustworthy. They're not very stable, that's for sure. Many of these currencies in these BRICS nations are not very stable. And some of these nations aren't even democracies. I mean, look at Iran, and look at Russia, and look at China. For really, when you think about it, and think about where things are in those economies and how much trust can be done through those. It's only until one of those nations come out as a stronghold, or two nations where I think their currencies to be the most trusted between those nations would likely need to be done. And then other nations will probably feel left out and maybe not want to participate in that. But again, as the Enoch Godongwana, who is the South Africa's finance minister, he said implementation would be difficult and the system would not be designed to directly challenge SWIFT. So that's one opinion from there, but nonetheless, I think it's something that is a potential and a possibility, and they're looking for this thing to be implemented. They probably will continue to talk, and during an open session of the Iranian parliament, Mohammed Bakir Kalibaf said that Iran will access BRICS Pay starting in January of 2024. Now you think about that. Russia and Iran, which are the nations that are probably going to have the toughest sanctions right now, especially with what's going on in the world, they of course they're desperate for anything. So they will access to BRICS Pay. So the enemies of the United States are going to be the ones that are going to be adopting it first. What does that say about other nations that aren't necessarily enemies of the United States, but would like to declare independence, or at least to some degree, from the dollar, like India and South Africa, and some of these other BRICS Plus nations as well too? What's going to happen with them if they are, convinced to not join, because doing so would essentially enable America's enemies, but not only America's enemies, but enemies of, especially in the case of Israel, promoting terrorist countries like Iran. Iran is the largest state sponsor of terror out there. So, and many nations around the world are against Iran. Many BRICS nations are against what they're doing. By the way, including Russia. Russia condemns what happened in Israel as well. So the BRICS nations are not all in lockstep with each other, and their currencies are very, very different. In fact, much more different in terms of their strength, in terms of their value and stability, than Western currencies, which is why it's a much more cohesive system in the West than it is in the East. But nonetheless, if this thing is adopted and used by other nations and for transactions, and this is something that very well could become the greatest threat to the dollar. But you know, what is the greatest threat to the dollar? What is the greatest threat to all currencies out there? Let's talk a little bit about that, because they can even have the United States name and imagery on them. And when you have that, well, then you've got yourself something that is quite intriguing. Gold and silver provide the best way to declare independence. And I think the de-dollarization that you're seeing is with the increase in global gold reserves and even utilizing and saving silver by some of these countries. You know, and again, you don't hear that much in the BRICS nations or nations in the East in terms of using silver. But nonetheless, I think silver could potentially be something that could be adapted at some level, even though it's not widely as it is now. But gold in the East is definitely something that is far more popular, personally and publicly. Now, obviously, nations don't store silver in their reserves as part of their reserves. It doesn't really make sense to do so, but they do have gold. And of course, silver typically does follow gold. And we're seeing a period now where the price of these commodities, we'll call them commodities, as well as sound money, commodity money, maybe is a good term to use. They are going up in price because of all the tension that's around the world. And I think that really, in the end, what is the greatest threat to the dollar right now? Well, yeah, it's not gold and silver right now, but it could be coming soon that this SWIFT system, this BRICS pay system, to challenge SWIFT, if implemented correctly and done the right way through other means, very well could become something that could challenge the SWIFT system. I said, we'll see how it plays out. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. Would like to extend a multitude of gratitude to each and every one of you for taking the time to watch, and to encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.